year's Medal of Courage winner goes to Sergeant Stephen Smith. It is a posthumous award. I'll tell you a little bit about Sergeant Smith. 2008 graduate of LaGrange High School, where he was a two-time GHSA state placer. In 2007, he was fourth and third in 2008. He was a two-time area champion and the 2008 LaGrange Daily News Wrestler of the Year. He served his community as a police officer in Glenville from 2008 to 2009. Then he joined the U.S. Army. He felt the call to serve his country, fulfilling a lifelong dream to do just that. He was stationed at Fort Stewart, a member of the 4th B Company, and then in Afghanistan, on July the 23rd of 2013, he was killed by a disguised insurgent bomber. He was awarded numerous military awards and commendations, including the Bronze Star, awarded by the President, of course, Purple Heart, Army Achievement Medal, Army Combat Infantry Badge, the Army Good Conduct Medal, National Defense Service Medal, and the Non-Commissioned Officer Professional Development Ribbon. To accept Sergeant Smith's award is his high school coach, Scooter Weathers. We'll get Coach Weathers to come up, say a few words about the man that he coached.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here today for Stephen Smith. He was a great man, a great husband, a great father, a great wrestler, a great soldier. I had the honor and privilege of coaching him. He had a lot of grit and determination about himself. And he was one who, when he got on the wrestling mat, I knew what I got. He was hard to break. He was stubborn some at times, like all kids are. And I remember in his senior year, we had a kid who lost a match. Wasn't the referee's fault. Trying to be funny there a little bit. And kid went behind our bench and threw the headgear. I started to get up to go get him. Stephen grabbed my arm. He said, "I got him, Coach." They took him down the hall and chewed him out. Came back, sat down. I looked at him, and he had that little grin he always had. And I looked at him, and I says, "Does that remind you of something?" And he said, "Yes, sir, me." He said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." When he became an officer, police officer, he'd always talked about wanting to be in the military like his dad. And I remember one day in the restroom room, I looked over and there he was, and I was like, "What are you doing here?" He said, "I just joined the military." And the only question I asked him was, I said, "What took you so long?" Because we had had talks on the bus, because we spent more time on the bus than we did in our own homes. And we talked about that, and he finally joined, and he did what he loved. He gave everything he had wrestling. He gave everything he had in the military. The one thing I always preach to all my kids, and I tell my parents at our first meeting, is winning state titles is important, wrestling's important, but my state championship is to see these kids turn into good men, good husbands, and good fathers. And he did all three. I remember he came home with his wife one day at a tournament, and I'm coaching. I looked around, there he is holding his little boy. And I could just see it in his face. I was like, he made it. And he said, "Coach, we got another one coming." And I could just see it in his face. He was excited. So a year or so later, and they were having a third one, and I said, "You know what causes this, right?" And he said, "Yes, sir." But this is how I knew him as a wrestler. I knew him as a person. He was like a son to me. And it's an honor for him to be inducted into this. I want to thank all of his family. For allowing me to share this moment. It was a great honor and a great pleasure to be his coach. Thank you.
see the picture. Rob, tell me about some of your earliest memories of wrestling. How did you get your start?
Got my start. I was trying out for the boys basketball team in 8th grade, and after the first day I realized I was not cut out for basketball, so my coach, Tim Sproul, asked me to come out for wrestling.
Mm-hmm. And when did you discover you were pretty good at wrestling?
Well, it wasn't my first year.
Mm-hmm.
My first year, I think I won one match. It was my second year I went undefeated, so that was good.
Oh, that was a pretty good jump.
Yeah.
What do you attribute that to?
I went to the Granby School of Wrestling that summer, and my best friend growing up was a kid by the name of Steve Martin, who's went on to have a really great career as a wrestler and is current coach in college and at Old Dominion University. And he kind of took me under his wing, and the rest is history.
Well, you mentioned him. Any other the people that you were really responsible for your success in the sport?
I think anybody who's been successful in the sport has a lot of people who had a tremendous influence. I could go to Tim Sproul, my middle school coach, and launch into Keith Lawrence, my high school coach. Bill Martin Sr., who started the Granby School of Wrestling, was huge. And then Bill Pincus and Glenn Gormley, my college coaches. They were tremendously helpful. And then, you know, when I got into coaching, you know, Frank Kiefer brought me down to Atlanta, and just I've always been a student of great coaches, and I was fortunate to work with a lot of them.
Tell me a few unusual or funny stories that you won't ever forget from your time in wrestling.
You always remember the good things, right? And
Or the really, really bad things.
well, you know, it's funny. The older you get, the more you forget about the bad things, and you only tend to remember the good things. I think winning a city championship when I was in 9th grade was a big deal. Obviously, winning a state championship in high school was a big deal. I remember winning my quarterfinals match at the NCAA's, which, you know, guaranteed me an All-American status, was a pretty huge deal in my life. And
so some of those things you're the most proud of in wrestling?
Absolutely, yeah. And then, you know, you go as a coach, winning a state championship with my team in 1995 was special. Being an athlete is a heck of a lot easier than being a coach, because you are in control of yourself. I think being a coach is extraordinarily difficult, because in wrestling you have to manage so many different aspects. You've got to make sure kids are okay mentally. You've got to make sure they're on weight. You got to make sure they're healthy. You got to help them from devastating times. I'll never forget that, you know, coaching my son over the past 4 years, or 6 years actually, has been interesting, because as you get older, you tend to remember only the good things. And when you have a child experience heartbreak, it takes you back to so many of the really tough times you had as an athlete. But by and large, the sport just brings out so much good, and that helps propel you to whatever you choose to do in your professional life.
Let's elaborate on that a little bit. What does wrestling teach other than how to wrestle?
Well, to me, it starts with a mindset, and it's a mindset to overcome any adversity that you were presented with. When I made the leap from being a teacher and a wrestling coach into the professional world, everybody told me how hard it was. And I reflected back to the way I thought in wrestling and what I taught when I was a coach in wrestling, and that was, if you work harder than anybody else and you do things the right way, good things will happen. You know, you're going to hit adversity, you're going to have to overcome adversity, and if you work harder than everybody else, good things will happen. And maintaining a positive mindset. I mean, you go from heartbreak to, thinking positively, and you have no other choice. And I think that's the power of your mind. You lose and you're not going to win a title. How can you regroup mentally to be able to come back and get third? And that's a game of wrestling. The other part is get away from the wins and losses and perform to the best of your ability. If you can put your head on the pillow and know that you put forth every ounce of energy, you did everything right, there is nothing to be ashamed of.
Well, you're here for what you've given to the sport of wrestling. What has wrestling given to Rob Larimore? What has it given to you?
Yeah, wrestling has given me relationships that I value tremendously, and when you build relationships through the sport of wrestling, you understand there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of sacrifice, and you go through those things, the ups and the downs with people that create relationships that are truly special. And as I look at my teammates, or I look at the young men who I've coached over the years, I've had the good fortune of maintaining these relationships with them, and they were terribly instrumental in creating this whole Wrestlers in Business network that we have built in the state of Georgia. And it has also brought relationships from people who I knew when I was teaching and coaching back into the forefront. And it's all about the relationships, and that's what makes it special.
How do you feel about being inducted in the Hall of Fame as the Outstanding American?
It's an honor. It gave me the realization that I'm getting old, because young people don't get inducted into the Hall of Fame, and it also gave me a real sense of pride and purpose that, once again, all of the hard work, try to do things the right way, ultimately it'll be recognized in material success.
Any closing thoughts?
No closing thoughts other than, I do think it's important that I recognize my family, from my mom and my dad and my brother who were so supportive, and, of course my wife, the wife of a wrestling coach, has extraordinary patience and understanding, and then you get into the business world and she continues to be my best friend and my best support.
All right, Rob Larimore, Outstanding American Wrestling Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'd like to personally congratulate fellow inductees, Pete, Mike, David, Bill, Steve, and the family and friends of Sergeant Smith for their induction this evening. Over the past 25 years, I've had the opportunity to see you perform, and your commitment, both on and off the mat, is impressive. When I think of outstanding Americans, I think about my grandparents and my parents. My grandfathers represented America's greatest generation. My dad's father raised 3 boys, just like Sandy and I, and he worked for the telephone company his entire career. My mom's father served for World War II as a chaplain, and he was Episcopalian rector his professional career, serving as many as 3 congregations in rural Virginia at the same time. My father was an entrepreneur in the insurance business, and my mom was a school teacher. I've been blessed with having positive role models in my family who are outstanding Americans to help me understand honor, faith, work ethic, and the value of education. Wrestling is a unique sport that pushes the athlete to the highest level, both mentally and physically. And although it is an individual sport on the surface, it takes a team of role models to commit their knowledge, experience, and love to help an athlete compete to the very best of their ability. I found wrestling first day after basketball tryouts. I knew I was out of my league. Coach Sproul, Tim Sproul, was my junior high coach, and he pulled me into the wrestling room and endured a season where I lost every match except one. He turned out to be one of my greatest workout partners and worked out with me through my college career. And I knew I was starting to turn the corner when I could hang with Tim on the mat. Keith Lawrence was my high school coach who helped me off and on the mat with his knowledge and perspective. He's the godfather of my firstborn child, Robert, and he is a very close personal friend as well today. Gray Simons offered me my first opportunity to compete at the University of Tennessee. I grew up about 10 miles from where Gray grew up, and he learned wrestling from the legendary Bill Martin, as did Keith Lawrence. Gray made wrestling techniques seem so easy, but very few could execute as well as Gray. When Tennessee dropped the program, my first attraction to William & Mary was my workout partner, Kevin Turner, who made it here today. And the coaches, Bill Pincus and Glenn Gormley, they helped me so much to continue to become tougher mentally throughout my collegiate career. Their enthusiasm inspired me to contribute to a program on the rise, and I still remain close with these gentlemen today after 25 years, and we get together for a reunion at the NCAA tournament every year. I'm grateful for the impact of all my coaches on my career, but more importantly, how they helped me grow into a man to prepare for life after wrestling. My first job was a teacher and a coach. I met Frank Kiefer at the Granby School of Wrestling, and he had the wonderful gift. He taught me being a communicator and a motivator. He was nicknamed affectionately Conan the Librarian, and I'm very grateful that he gave me the opportunity to run his wrestling room when I was only 24. I'm thankful to my wonderful wife, Sandy, who has demonstrated extraordinary patience and understanding for over 20 years. From the start of our first date, she never tried to change who I am, but she's worked very hard to file down some of the edges. She has helped me raise Robert, Sutton, and Preston with a wrestling mindset, which basically means whatever you commit to, work harder than your peers, believe in yourself, exhibit kindness, and good things will ultimately happen. My good friends, Steve Martin, Mark McLaughlin, Audie Pendleton, have given me a wonderful gift of friendship. I know I can trust them when I need their counsel, and I appreciate their thought process. Having Steve as a friend was almost like having a player coach grow up. Steve convinced me to commit to wrestling because it was easier for fat guys like me to get a scholarship, coming from a 118-pounder. His knowledge of the sport is vast, but more importantly, his commitment to friendship is as intense as he is. Mark Mega Man McLaughlin was my co-captain of William & Mary. He's one of the most amazing guys I know. He doesn't understand the word can't, and he sets a standard for commitment with his family, his profession as a neurosurgeon, and his eternal quest for higher education. I had the good fortune of coaching Audie in high school. We've been close ever since. Unlike Tim Sproul, I gave up going live with Audie after his sophomore summer at Cornell. Audie has recently sacrificed his time away from his family to help my son Robert finish his season on the podium as a junior and a senior. And sitting in the corner was pretty special. We launched the Wrestlers in Business chapter at the suggestion of Mega Man McLaughlin, who started the Princeton chapter. Wrestlers in Business is a professional networking organization for people who admire the sport of wrestling, want to meet other professionals who enjoy wrestling. We promote the hiring of professionals with a wrestling mindset, doing business with people who have a wrestling mindset, and giving back to the sport of wrestling. We have 5 to 6 formal meetings a year, and it's an opportunity for people to get together. In fact, Tuesday, Mark Cody, the head coach at Oklahoma, and Georgia-born Collins Hill native Ryan Milhouse are going to be here, and Mark's going to share his thoughts. On June 14th, we have the CEO of Equifax, which is a Fortune 500 company, and he's going to share his thoughts with us. He wrestled at Purdue, Rick Smith. All of us can learn from these speakers, and we encourage you to join us. As mentioned earlier, last November, we hosted the All-Star Classic, and everybody got a chance to see what the Atlanta Takedown Association, Bud Hennable and his team could do. We can host an NCAA tournament in this city, and I think we will. I've personally benefited from the Wrestlers in Business Network by building relationships with people I didn't know much before very well. And these are outstanding Americans and role models. John Bardis, Stan Desick, and Bud Hennable have made greater contributions to the sport than I will ever make. And they represent everything I aspire to be as I continue to grow personally, spiritually, and professionally as I approach my 50th birthday this year. I want to thank you to the Georgia chapter of the National Hall of Fame for this award. I'm honored to be a recipient, and I'm thankful for everything the sport of wrestling has taught me on and off the mat. Thank you.
That you're most proud of during your time in wrestling?
Well, one was Georgia State. One was we grew the kids program in Georgia. My whole background is kids wrestling, and I think that is probably the thing that we established in Georgia in the 80s. We got the kids wrestling program built in Cobb County, Gwinnett County, Fayette County. It grew some big numbers, and it got kids going. And I think the other things that I'm kind of proud of is both my sons had to put up with me being a volunteer and running around, but they both now are volunteers and doing the same thing and giving their time, and I think that's real important to me.
So what do you think wrestling teaches other than how to wrestle? Life lessons.
You know, I think in wrestling, everybody thinks it's an individual sport, but I think one of the life lessons is your teammates in wrestling. It's such a support. You watch these kids trying to make weight, trying to make the team, having a problem, and the team is there to support them.
And even nationwide, when you find out somebody's a wrestler, you immediately have a bond.
That's right. But it's a team sport. It's an individual sport, but there's a team bond to it.
Mm-hmm. Now, you're here for what you've given to the sport of wrestling. What has wrestling given to you, Bill?
A lot of good friends, a lot of good memories, and I think it just gave me the feeling that you can accomplish something in anything is if you're willing to put the time in to learn about it. As I said, I didn't wrestle, and yet I had a good, successful career as a coach, and then after that, promoting wrestling.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're into the Hall of Fame. How do you feel about that?
That was great, and it was kind of a surprise because I look around at the fellows that are going in with me now and the past, and these are guys that have given their whole life to wrestling, and they were wrestlers. They worked hard into high schools. They coached. They teachers, and anybody that's willing to spend all that time as a teacher and all those years, they are good people. And it just was a real honor to be with them. And it's also kind of fun because as we were talking earlier, Steve Latizori. I had the opportunity at Wheeler High School. The principal asked me to find him a coach, and we hired Steve. And same thing with Randy Bortles. They asked me to find a coach, and I hired Randy. So I feel like, I had some success and two outstanding men.
In the hall, both in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
Any closing thoughts?
Just a real honor to be associated with this group of people. I think back to our trips with the USA teams. We'd go to the Nationals. Brian Haig, Steve Day, Ed Winterstein,
More Hall of Fame kind of guys.
Dennis Strami,
Oh, yeah.
and we all made these trips, and I think of the great times we had and the friendships that I was able to make.
All right, Bill Hess, Hall of Fame, congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Nothing I'd rather do.
As I was thinking about things that I could talk about, I don't have that experience of having wrestled in high school and college. I got started in wrestling later on. But I think about the things that I was able to do and the memories of coaching in 4 different states, and a lot of fond memories, especially here in Georgia. But things like taking wrestlers to summer camps in the Rocky Mountains, having breakfast at 6 a.m. in the morning at a McDonald's on a riverboat on the Mississippi River and watching the sun come up with a busload of cadet wrestlers from Georgia. Eating pizza at 11:30 at night, driving in a van coming back from Brandon, Florida. State champions banquet at Woodward Academy, where Pete Fritz had put together, and we brought in all the boys, and they ate one after another, maybe half a dozen Chick-fil-A sandwiches, and we'd have to send for more. And those were the fond memories. Now, and some of the stories I think about as I look back were some of the boys that we wrestled and we took to national tournaments, and a couple of stories that I think coaches would all appreciate. One, we had a boy, it was a national tournament, and he lost his first match very quickly. Lost his second match even quicker. Came off the mat, head down, and the classic thing, well, you got the experience to wrestle in a national tournament. And he looked at me and he said, Coach, I wasn't out there long enough to get any experience. And another boy, we were at a national tournament, and his first round draw was he was the best kid in the tournament. And he was just worried what he was going to do. And I said, well, just go out there and shoot your best move. He went out there, he took this boy down, and he had this big smile on his face, and 30 seconds later he was tacked and off the mat. And he came out and he said, Coach, I know there were good wrestlers out there, but I never realized how good they could be. And he scored the only 2 points on that boy in the whole tournament. So I was very proud of him for that. My wife reminded me of a favorite story of hers. I was teaching and coaching in a small town in Colorado, Fort Morgan High School, and our 7th and 8th grade program was a spring program. And coming into spring break, the boys all wanted to practice during spring break. And I said, not a problem. We'll practice in the mornings. But Coach, we want to practice in the afternoon too. I said, well, I got to paint my house. About 10 minutes later, here they come back. Coach, we'll help you paint the house if we can have 2-a-day practices. And I said, okay. Needless to say, they got more paint on them than the house. But we got the house painted. And they got their two-a-day practices. They went into their conference tournament and dominated the tournament. And the neat thing about this group of boys, they showed to me what the love of wrestling is all about. And they went on their high school program. They won the state championship in Colorado in the largest division, and they were the smallest school 5 years in a row. But they had a love for wrestling. And I think of all the things, looking back, working with kids, if we can teach them to love wrestling, you varsity coaches and the high school coaches and the college coaches, you're going to teach them how to wrestle. The junior high kids just need to learn to love it, and these kids loved it. Another story, I got upstaged last night, but some of you weren't there. After a dual match, Wheeler High School, all the parents and wrestlers got together and we had a surprise birthday party for Coach Latizori. And then he surprised all of us by proposing to his lovely wife, Robin. Now, Robin didn't have much of a chance. I mean, with all the parents and wrestlers there, she had to say yes. And actually, I think this was probably the best move Latizori has ever made on the mat or anywhere. And as I keep telling him, he married up. Probably the most important memory to me in wrestling was the night that both of my sons wrestled on the varsity at Wheeler High School together. It kind of brought it all to me, what wrestling meant. I'd like to thank the Hall of Fame board for letting me join this great group, but I also need to thank two really important people. One was my wife, and the other was Mary Dukes, who was Mary Vasquez at that time. They really did all of the work for me. Team Georgia, Wheeler High School, they were the ones that got all the paperwork done. They did all the work at the tournaments. I just used to walk around and talk to people. But I really want to thank both of them. Mary couldn't make it tonight, but luckily Jeff is here representing his mom, and my wife Carol is here. Thank you very much.
Tell me a little bit about your earliest memories of wrestling. How did you get your start?
Well, my dad was stationed in Tehran, Iran in the military, and we moved around a lot when I was young, and every place we got stationed, he would start a youth wrestling program. So in Tehran, at the American school, I started wrestling about age 4. We had, I think, 4 different teams, and pretty much got my start there. But then as we moved around, he would start another youth wrestling program, because we moved pretty much every year, every 2 years. So that's how I really got involved with it.
So pretty much everywhere you went, you were wrestling?
Pretty much, with a different group of kids. And growing up, I never thought it was any different that I had a new group of friends every year. That's just the way the Army life goes. So that's what I became used to.
When did you discover you were pretty good at this?
Good question. I think during the youth wrestling days, and when we moved to Lithonia, Georgia, I thought I was pretty good then, and I wrestled a lot of matches between my 7th grade year in public school, and then going to Woodward Academy in my 8th grade year, and then actually from 8th to 9th grade, I probably wrestled a couple, 50, 60, 70 matches in the summer, and that's when I started to take the next step and thought, I could be pretty good at this, because I wasn't a big guy, I was a tiny guy, so.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's one thing about wrestling, you don't have to be a big guy.
Right, and that's what we try to sell to our kids. As all the wrestling coaches and wrestling fans know, it's, they're not going to tell you you're too small, you're too slow. It's a place for everybody, which is, why it's such a great sport.
Who are some of the people that you're grateful to for your success in wrestling?
Obviously, my dad, the biggest influence. John Martin, who started the Atlanta Takedown Club, big influence on me going from 8th and 9th grade. Spent a lot of time with him over the summers, and a lot of the guys who are in the Hall of Fame right now and in the Georgia chapter as well. Coach Johnny Stallings, who was my coach at Woodward Academy, and Larry Crosswick, who was my dad's assistant, and then the head coach who I kind of cut my teeth under before I took over. And Larry really kind of taught me how to be a professional and how to be a coach. And those are the three biggest influences, or four, I guess, in my wrestling career.
Well, what are some of the things that you're most proud of during your time in wrestling?
It's a good question because I think the thing I'm most proud of are the kids that I've coached and how they've conducted themselves. I think our kids have been real good at, coming from point A to point B and letting us take them in that direction. I've always prided myself on, being in better shape than anybody around. I think that's something that was in my control, that we weren't going to lose matches in overtime. My kids didn't get kicked out of tournaments. It's all about, I wanted to be a classy sort of an organization where, at the end of the day, when I got out of it like I am now, that people would look back and say, hey, you ran a clean program. Those kids were hard-nosed kids. They were never a problem. That you knew they were going to wrestle you straight up. There was nothing dirty about it. So I'm real proud of the kids I coach and the way they conducted themselves and the light that they brought on Woodward Academy Wrestling. I think that, there's certain programs, and this is just in any sport, that you look on and say, well, yeah, those guys are not the kind of group that I'd want to coach. I would hope that when people look at the kids and maybe not necessarily athletically, but as far as good kids, those are the kind of kids I wish I could coach, and that's what I think or one of the things anyway I'm most proud of about the program that I ran.
Are there Peter, anything that stands out? I mean, like weird or funny or most memorable? I'll never forget X.
Yeah, probably, and this is kind of a funny moment. I had a 220-pounder that quit on me, and I came home and I was complaining to my wife like a lot of coaches do. I'm saying, this kid, I can't believe he quit on me. We put some time in, and, and she said, well, you need to get off that because you still got those kids in the wrestling loft that are doing the job for you. So I went in the next day, and we were warming up and going through drills, and I just stopped, and I said, look, everybody come in here, and I said, guys, look, I just want to tell you that, as hard as I am on you, I love you guys. You guys are up here, the ones that are putting in the time and the ones that I really care about. But don't get lost, and I'm still going to chew you out if you're not doing right. And then there was a silence, and my 189-pounder at the time said, Coach, you had us at hello. And I was like, get back to work. I said, and nothing changes now. So that was kind of a funny because they weren't used to the levity in the program for me anyway. I was always kind of on task and focused and yelling, screaming, hollering, all that kind of stuff.
What do you think wrestling teaches other than how to wrestle? In other words, lessons for life.
Yeah, it's the best sport going. I also coach women's golf, and I think that teaches a lot of lessons too. But gosh, the lessons for a young kid that wrestling teaches is, how to do things on your own, how to be accountable, how to achieve. I've always said, and any wrestling coach out there knows that you don't have to have a lot of athletic ability to be a great wrestler, but you have to have a huge, strong work ethic, and that'll get you, pretty close to the top. Obviously athletic talent, if you combine that, then you can knock it out of the park, but you don't have to be a great athlete. I mean, I'm a product of that. Most of the kids that I coach at Woodward are a product of that, is that we've been very successful, but I don't have a lot of kids and have not coached a lot of kids who are great athletes, but they will work their butt off. And, the old adage of you can get to the top 10% by just outworking people is so true in wrestling. And that's, at the end of the day, when you look back and say, gosh, it is totally, I'm a product of what I put into it, bottom line. And there are a lot of talented kids who have come through that have not been successful because they didn't put in the work. And those kids that keep plotting along and keep pushing the envelope and keep getting better every day and keep showing up, and that's a big thing too, they can be up there on top. And that's a model or a microcosm of what happens in life. Wrestling is life. It's I'm going to work, and I can be in the top 10% by just outworking people, and it's so true.
Well, you're being inducted to the Hall of Fame for what you've given to wrestling. What has wrestling given to you, Chris?
Oh, gosh. So many things. It's given me an identity, I think, most of all, and that was one of the things I struggled with when I retired a couple of years ago, is that it's such a big part of my life. It's not what I do, it's who I am. And I kind of thought, well, gosh, if I get out of wrestling, then I'm just like anybody else walking the street. I've lost my identity. You struggle with that a little bit, but what it gives you is a chance to, in a small way, affect the lives of young people and help propel them to bigger and better things. And at the time you're going through everything, wrestling is the end-all, be-all of your existence. But when you step back, you're saying, gosh, if I can just have a small part in helping these young guys, and young girls too, because I've had a lot of great wrestlerettes, quality girls that have gone on to do great things, and just to be a small part of their lives is so rewarding. And people, because I had a fairly successful career in high school, and they said, well, gosh, you won 4 state titles. It doesn't even compare to having another kid get on the podium, or a kid that doesn't have the athletic ability of most of your kids, win his first match, or qualify for the state tournament. That's what you're in it for, and that's what at the end of the day drives you and makes you feel great about what you're doing.
How do you feel about your induction to the Hall of Fame?
I know my dad is extremely proud.
When will I have to say here, your dad's in the Hall of Fame too?
Yes, and I know he's very proud. It's very humbling. When I walked down on the floor on the mats at Gwinnett last week, you look at the people that are there and the stories they have to tell, and certainly I have my stories. Not necessarily a lot of the stories they're telling was when I was wrestling, either against them or for them. But it's overwhelming. It's I think as a wrestler, you don't start wrestling and go, gosh, one day I hope to be in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. I think that may happen in football and baseball, but it's not something you think about in wrestling. Yeah, my dad's of course very aware of that, and I think he's very proud of that. I think initially it probably meant more to my dad than it did to me, because it hadn't sunk in until you get around the people, and those are a lot of the people that I look up to, in fact all of them, because they all have a story to tell. They've all done something extremely significant in the sport of wrestling in Georgia, and to be a part of it, to be allowed to be around that is quite an honor. And I kind of made the joke with Dennis Strami that we weren't being inducted into the Young Man's Club. I could tell that because, and I was like, wow, I told that to Steve Latazori too, and I don't think I'm the youngest, but I'm kind of on the young end, but to be around that type of character that they bring every day and is quite humbling and quite an honor. I could stand here for a long time and tell you how thrilled I am and what an honor it is, but yeah, I couldn't even do it justice.
Any closing thoughts?
Again, I'd like to thank everybody that made this possible. I know, like I said, you don't grow up, you don't wake up going, gosh, one day I want to be in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. It's just kind of something that verifies that all the stuff that you do and have put into was worth it. And not only do you realize it in the small group of kids that wrestle for you, but there's some other people that realize it too. And when that happens, you're like, wow, maybe I did a little bit of the right thing and we're headed in the right direction. So I'm very appreciative of wrestling. It's the best thing that's going on these days. It's getting bigger, and that can only help young guys and girls, for that matter, too, around the country. So I'm excited and humbled.
All right. Pete Fritz, Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Rob Larimore roughly the same age as I am, and he did this without glasses, which I'm still trying to figure that out. So that's got to be coming next, Rob. But let me put these on. First, I'd like to thank the board for the induction and anybody who had a hand in helping them getting me here today. I'd also like to thank and congratulate the other members of the class of 16 who are being inducted tonight. I accept this honor on behalf of Woodward Academy Wrestling and all the members of the Circle W Club. It's a total team effort. It's not one person who stands up here and gets this award, because you can't do it alone. The one thing, I'm not the greatest coach, I was not the greatest wrestler, but I'm pretty good, I like to think, of surrounding myself with good people. And that makes all the difference, the best people. In wrestling, because it's a little bit different, you don't grow up and say, hey, one day I hope to be in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. That just doesn't happen. It's a kind of a new thing. Football players, baseball players, they might say that.
But I don't think wrestlers ever think about that as they're growing up and going through the process. As I look around the room, I think I know probably 95% of the people in here, and what a wealth of knowledge it is. It's some of the greatest minds in sports, and especially in wrestling. I'm in awe of those who are here tonight, and I'm even more honored to be mentioned in the same breath as a lot of those here tonight. Since you guys are a wrestling crowd, it's hard to stand here and tell everyone what a great sport wrestling is. You guys already know that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't. You wouldn't have been honored in the years past, so you guys already know what wrestling does. But here's what it's done for me. Everything in my life has been involved with wrestling. I was an average athlete. I know that now. I didn't know that then. You know, growing up, you think, well, gosh, I'm not playing baseball because the coach doesn't like me. Well, now when I look back, I'm like, I wouldn't have played me either, you know, at 105 pounds. But wrestling kind of equaled the playing field, and my dad introduced me to it, and believe it or not, I played varsity football at 110 pounds, and wrestling allowed me to do that because my wrestling coach, Johnny Stalling, said, well, and this is Johnny saying, well, hell, if he can wrestle, he can return punts. Now, he put me back there to return punts. I didn't catch most of them. I mean, they came through my hands. I didn't do a real good job, but he put me out there because he knew I wasn't afraid. I got my first job out of college because of wrestling. A teammate of mine, his father hired me because he said, I know what you've done on the wrestling mat. I know how hard you're willing to work, and that's all I need to know about you. I said, well, I don't know anything about cable television. He said, well, we'll teach you. So I got my first job. I met my wife because of wrestling at James Madison University. So everything positive in my life has been about wrestling. I'd like to thank my parents. Obviously, my dad got me into wrestling probably because he knew what wrestling did for him. It was, I don't know if I really even had a choice, possibly, but I just knew that wrestling was always what we did. I know growing up, wrestling, as you guys know, is a love-hate relationship. I mean, you love what it does, you love the sport, but there are times when you hate it. I mean, we always used to say the best day is the last day of wrestling season, the second best day is the beginning of wrestling season. It's just one of those love-hate relationships. And he would drag me to these tournaments in Alabama every single weekend. I'd wrestle like 4 weight classes, 16 matches, and you know, you're like, what are we doing here? But I appreciate my dad getting involved and pushing me to do those things. And my mom was kind of the levity in the situation, and I could always depend on her when things you know, weren't going the way I wanted them to go. And my sister was, you know, like I heard Bud up here and say what a big influence his sister was because she was his first training partner. Well, my sister would fill the same void. Anytime my dad would want me to try something new at a young age, Debbie was over there, and he'd say, get down in referee's position, and we're going to do this. So I appreciate her being there, and she always had my back. I'd like to thank my wife. I didn't really know any other way to coach wrestling other than what I had been taught, so I just assumed everybody missed every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every New Year's, every year. And she allowed me to do that. She's from a basketball background, so I don't even really know how we got together, but she's become a wrestling person, but it's a lot of long hours. I appreciate her letting me do something you love. She raised my kids when I wasn't around, and now that I've retired, I've been able to spend a little bit more time with my kids. So I apologize for being away, but that's the only way I know how to do it. I had a lot of great assistant coaches along the way, and I'd like to thank them for everything they've done for me. You've got to have good parents. I knew Cliff Ramos stood up here years ago and said you can't do it without good parents and good wrestlers and good kids. You just can't do it. It would be nice if you didn't have to have those good people all the time, but gosh, it makes it so much more enjoyable. My mentors in wrestling, obviously my father who got me into it and coached me pretty much all my life. And Johnny Stallings, who was my high school coach, who gave me the opportunity. I think the world of him. He's not able to be with us tonight. A lot of people ask me, a lot of kids anyway, why do you wear your watch upside down? I said, well, that's the way my wrestling coach wore it. And I thought that was pretty cool because I think the world of him. And Larry Crosswick, who was my dad's assistant, who I took over from. I was Larry's assistant for 6 years, and Larry didn't have to step down, but he knew that this was my dream job. He taught me how to be a coach, how to be professional, and I thank him for that. Excuse me. When you're a young coach coming on in your mid-20s, all you think about is winning. All you want to do is win. It doesn't matter how you get there, you want to win. And as you get older and more mature, hopefully, that kind of goes out the window. Wins and losses take care of themselves, but it's more about setting kids up to be successful beyond their wrestling careers. And I think that we've done that at Woodward Academy. I've always loved competing against the best and trying to set up our schedule to wrestle the best people. And a lot of those coaches are here tonight. And just to name a few, Doug Thurman, Cliff Ramos, Jim Glasser, Jeff Wheeler, Mickey Statham, Jim Bailey, Kirk Hoffman, Ed Winterstein, Dennis Straume, class individuals. You never worried about going to wrestle them because you knew they ran great programs. You didn't worry about your kids getting hurt because their kids knew how to wrestle. Now, you might get your ass handed to you, but you're not going to get hurt because they know what's going on. The only time you're really worried about your kids getting hurt is when you go wrestle the teams that are not as good because they don't really know what's going on. But I enjoyed competing against them to try to see how good we could be, and I appreciate that. Those who know me the best, I'm kind of, and my daughter, OCD. I'm a little nutty about what I want to do, and I'm very much a control freak, and as a wrestling coach, you have to learn that you can't do it all yourself. Well, I had to, one of my assistants, and my biggest assistant, in more ways than one, Luke Underwood, he called me out on it, and he said, look, you can't do everything. You got to use us. He said, we're sitting over here doing nothing. You're trying to do everything yourself. And I appreciate him doing that for me, because it took some stress off me and let everybody else be involved. But it's hard to let go of control when you're used to running the show and want to do everything yourself. But I learned from that you can't do it alone, and not just wrestling, but you can't do anything in life, and nor would you want to, because if you do it alone, you have nobody to celebrate with. So it's much more fun, it's much more enjoyable, mostly after things get done, to do it with a group so you can share it for years to come. As human beings, we all want to be liked and respected by our peers, and that was very important to me, and I hope that when I look back that people respect me for what I did and for the program that we ran. Like my father, most of you know him. If you don't, you've been under a rock for several years. Okay, I wear my emotions on my sleeve. I'm a yeller, screamer, and a hollerer. To my kids, I've had, not my personal kids, but my wrestling kids, we've had reunions. I've had to really apologize to some of them. I was like, gosh almighty, I apologize. I rode you. And they're like, nah, coach, you treat these kids, shoot, they have a silver spoon in their mouth. It's like, no, I was really over the line. And, you know, some of the officials, and a lot of you guys are in here tonight, I rode y'all pretty hard too. And I apologize for that. The one quick story about, I've got to have a couple of official stories, but I had a kid in the state finals, and I overheard one of the officials saying, oh my God, I got the Woodward kid in the finals. I got to referee Fritz's. And she said, the other official said, what are you talking about? That's the easiest job there is. He says, how so? He said, he's going to call the whole match for you. All you have to do is raise up the fingers when he's calling. Well, that was probably true, because I was, most of the time, you know, you're going from left to right, you're calling points. A couple different stories real quickly. I had a kid who wrestled for me, and he quit. He was a 215-pounder at the time, and I went home to my wife, and I was complaining to her and tell her, you know, how much I can't believe the kid quit and riding the kids hard. And she said, well, wait a second. I said, you were yelling at the wrong kids. The kids up in the loft aren't the ones that quit. I stepped back and I said, yeah, oh my gosh, you're right. So I go in the next day and we start practice, doing the warm-ups and everything, and I stop them, I call them all together, and I say, look, guys, take a seat. I said, you know, so I want to tell you that I love you. I appreciate you being out here. You know, you guys are the ones in here that are paying the price and doing everything that we want you to do, and I love you guys, and I'd do anything for you. But I'm still going to work you as hard as I can. And there was dead silence in the room, and our 189-pounder stood up, and he said, Coach, you had us at hello. So, I mean, kids are funny. Couple other stories, two official stories, and I told this to Randy Bortles. Randy was over refereeing a match, and we were wrestling McIntosh, and I think I was wrong, but I'm not sure. There's clarification on that. I thought we had a reversal, and I'm yelling at Randy, and I'm yelling at Randy, and I'm yelling at Randy, and I'm getting no call at all. Of course, I keep yelling at Randy. So I used to carry a pencil in my ear, so I turned around, The mat is where you guys are. I turn around and I slam the pencil on the gym floor, and it hit on the eraser and popped back up over my head and landed directly on the point in the middle of the mat. And Randy called timeout, and he looked at me, and I just said, I know. I went and sat down. So, and the last one, Greg Raber, Dr. John's son, Big Greg, and I've known him for most of my life. Refereeing probably the semifinals of the state tournament, and I thought we had two, and I'm yelling out at Greg, and I'm saying, that's two, that's two, that's two, that's two. How can that not be two? How can that not be two? And he got right up in my face. He said, guys, because I said it's not. And I said, clear, and sat down. I retired from wrestling a couple years ago, and I thought about that a little bit because at Woodward Academy and around the south area of Atlanta, I'm known as Pete Fritz, the wrestler. I mean, that's my identity. And I kind of thought, well, if I get out of wrestling, I kind of lose who I am. And that's, you know, it's hard to do that sometimes. I knew it was the right thing to do because we have Jeff Reagan on board now, and he's doing an outstanding job and taking the program where it needs to go. But it was hard to do that. I wanted to make sure. I would have thought, which is totally wrong, that if I had gotten out of wrestling and not won a state team title, that it would have been a failure. Not true. But that's the way I thought. The program is in great hands right now, and I'm thankful for that. And I'd like to thank everybody who's had a hand in anything I've done. I'm proud to be a member of the Hall of Fame, proud to be a Woodward Academy, and I'm proud to be a Fritz. Thank you.
Mike, what are some of your earliest memories of wrestling? How did you get your start in the sport?
I was a student at Briarcliff High School in physical education. The football coach was my PE teacher. We had a unit on wrestling. He was, after football, was asked to be the wrestling coach. He asked me to come out, and that's where I got started.
Did you discover you were pretty good at it?
I think that he could see I had potential just from the wrestling class. I seemed to catch on fairly well. For my size, I was fairly athletic.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've talked about that before, you know. You don't have to be a big guy to be a great wrestler.
No, I was less than 100 pounds when I first started.
There you go.
I competed at 98, was the first weight class in competition.
Mm-hmm. Who are some of the people that have inspired you, you credit for your success in the sport of wrestling?
Probably the most important person in my career in wrestling was Sam Black, my high school football coach. From there, went to the University of Georgia. The SEC did not have a strong wrestling program other than Auburn. The coach really didn't know much, but we had a good room. Had a junior college national champion and several other state champions in and around the Southeast. So that certainly helped the level, my level of expertise in wrestling.
What are some of the things that you remember the most about wrestling? I'll never forget this incident or that incident, or something funny or unusual happened.
The most unusual that really shaped my officiating career after that was in the SEC, or it was the SEIWC, was wrestling in the finals, had a lead in the last 5 seconds. The wrestler made a reversal. Back then you had writing time up to 2 minutes, and I certainly had more than 2 minutes, no question about it. So I would have won. They went over to the writing time person, who happened to be a 12-year-old, who said, oh, the watches didn't work. So I lost the match by a point.
Oh, my goodness.
From that experience, when I went out to officiate, I wanted to make sure that everything was perfect. I didn't want another wrestler to experience a loss because of my fault, an official's fault, the table's fault, whatever.
Right, right. What are some of the things you're most proud of?
Sir?
What are some of the things you're most proud of during your time in wrestling?
You know, wrestling for me was not about me. It was about the wrestlers on the mat when I was officiating. It was about the wrestlers on the mat when I was coaching. I didn't do this for me. I enjoyed bringing a young athlete along and watch his level of success rise. The confidence. Wrestling will give you a tremendous sense of confidence because it's all you. I could go play football. I could sit on the bench and win a state championship. Well, how am I going to feel? I could go out there, play the best game I played, and lose. Did I lose? No. The team lost. But in wrestling, it's all you. It's dependent on what you do in the wrestling room, what you do to prepare yourself to get ready.
That kind of dovetails into my next question about it. What do you think wrestling teaches other than how to wrestle, or life lesson?
Oh, it teaches you that a good work ethic leads to success. You can, my wrestling in high school took me to coaching, and I was successful because I knew what it took to be a success. Hard work, discipline, extra effort. You get better by putting in more time and more work than your opponent.
How'd you get into officiating, Mark?
You know, I'm not sure. It was just a logical thing to do after I graduated from high school. Now, at that time, one of the head official in Georgia officiated a lot of my matches, so I knew him personally. And I don't know if I just went out or he asked me would I officiate. There were not many officials in Georgia at that time, so they were looking for officials. So my dad, after I graduated from college, was the booking agent for the Wrestling Officials Association. There were a couple of interims, and then I became the booking secretary for about 15 years, 16 years.
What do you enjoy about officiating?
Just being right there, the best seat in the house. I mean, I was out there with them. You get to feel the intensity of what is going on in a wrestling match better there than in the stands.
Well, you're here because of what you've given to wrestling. What has wrestling given to you?
Wrestling, anything I've done, I've been a success. So whether it was coaching, whether it was teaching, high school administration, being a principal, all of that contributed to what I did in wrestling.
So how do you feel about your induction to the Hall of Fame?
Wow, I'm really excited about it. I've officiated 50 years, and I thought maybe there's a chance that sometime I will be inducted, and it happened.
Wow. Any closing thoughts?
No, I've just, wrestling has made me what I am. I'm 72 years old. I'm a very healthy, productive young man. And I still work out. I still ride a bicycle. I run because of what wrestling instilled in me.
All right. Mike Godlewski, Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Thank you. wrestling was good for me. When I started Briarcliff many years ago, I was just 98, I know I wasn't even 98 pounds at that time. I might have been 90 pounds. My high school wrestling coach saw me in PE. He was my PE teacher, and we were doing a unit in wrestling, and he asked me to come out for the wrestling team. It changed my life. That was Sam Black at Briarcliff High School. He went on to win 6 state championships. He knew nothing about wrestling. He got a good book, and we learned together. What I did learn most from Mr. Black was the importance of technique and drilling. You had to do it 1,000 times before you could use it in a match. So we did a move 1,000 times before we moved on. And I want to thank him. I want to thank the wrestlers for buying into it. Didn't have any complaints. We just worked hard. I want to thank my father. I was one of 6 kids. We were all in sports, and he never missed any of our events. He was there 100%. After I got through wrestling, he organized the Georgia Wrestling Officials Association as president and the booking secretary. My college wrestling coach, Avery Harville, did not have any wrestling experience. He was a great person, brought in great wrestlers from the south part of the United States. I worked out with a junior college national champion from New York and wrestlers from all over. I learned Wizard Series from a wrestler in Pennsylvania. I learned legs from Steve Hampton. Won't forget those guys. My first experience of coaching was at Towers High School under John Snodley, who was my student teacher. I worked with Pat Watkins, learned an awful lot about wrestling from that standpoint, being a coach and how to organize it. When I went to Columbia High School the next year, the assistant principal was my high school wrestling coach. So that's probably how I ended up there. It was a wonderful experience. I had unbelievably great kids. Not necessarily great athletes, but great kids. The only thing better than the kids were probably their parents. We back then wrestled on felt horsehair mats, about that thick. How many people wrestled on a horsehair mat? Not very many. My parents got together, what do you want? I want a Resolite mat. That's what I'd wrestled on in college. I needed one. World of difference. They went out and got one. They raised $4,000, and that was a long time ago. That was 1966, 67. We had 2 Resolite mats before the county decided that, these coaches are complaining about Columbia having Resolite mats. We need to do something. So they went out and started buying mats, but didn't reimburse us for the mats. But the parents and the kids were great. I want to express thanks. After wrestling, I took over the president and booking secretary of the Georgia Wrestling Officials Association, and that was an experience. I was surrounded by great people. I want to thank Bill Bailey, one of my former wrestlers who's here tonight. He's still involved with wrestling. He's the middle school assistant at, St. Francis. He enjoyed wrestling so much, his son is the varsity wrestling coach at St. Francis. Dennis Stromey, one of my wrestlers at Columbia, state champion, and I don't think he remembered the state championship until after the match was over, and sometime after that he was somehow almost unconscious and being choked out. That how he finished, I don't know. It was instinct. But his son now has taken his place in coaching. Bill Upchurch, Joe Zabrowski came out late in the wrestling program. Somehow I got him off the volleyball team at Columbia. Great kids, worked hard. They added points in tournaments for us. They didn't win a state championship, but they were no less a part of the team and made me what I am and what the wrestling program at Columbia was. Cecil Flo, a student at Columbia, was one of my junior coaches. Back then there weren't many, I think Pete Fritz only had a junior program, and we were one of the few that did. But Cecil was their coach, along with Hal Beaver, a teacher at Wadsworth Elementary. He'd walk at least 30 students down the sidewalk for about a quarter of a mile and practice. That certainly helped our program, and I want to thank Hal and Cecil for that. I want to thank Robert Patrick. He was a math teacher at Columbia. He liked wrestling. He would come to practices, and he made me do lesson plans of what I was going to do. I'd already been out there 4 or 5 years, and he said, "You need a plan." I thought I had one. It made a tremendous difference in my teaching technique and working drills. In officiating, I was surrounded by great wrestlers. Tom Dursey wrestled at the New York Athletic Club. Retired from coaching after a brief coaching stint, and tremendous official. Taught me a lot. Steve Gwynn, another great official who's since retired. Enjoyed working with Steve, especially tournaments when he was going to sing the national anthem. I have never heard a better national anthem sung at a wrestling tournament than what Steve would do. Doug Ertley, Brad Lowe, both tremendous officials. I remember Brad coming out the first time, and we were doing training at Lovett. He goes, I'm out there. I said, "Okay, now it's your turn. You need to get out there." "Well, I'm not sure if I'm ready." "Brad, you got to get out there." So he finally goes out there and he does the match, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, this guy's great." And he comes out and says, "I don't think I'm ready yet." I said, "Brad, you got to get out there and do it." And he's one of the best around. Scott Funk, Keith Parker, Terry Pride. I sort of coached Terry Pride when he was coming over in the kids program, but he's another great official. Randy Bortles, Steve West, Ed Canner, Brian Roberts, Ted Brooks, just to name a few. But they are part of me, and I hope somewhere I left part of me with them. And I don't want to take anything away from what they've accomplished, but I hope that I am part of what they have accomplished. Thank you.
David, if you could, tell me something about your earliest memories of wrestling. How did you get your start in the sport?
I guess probably I was in the 8th grade, and it was after football season, and I was on the basketball court dribbling the basketball with some friends of mine, and up on the balcony, I was at Lithonia High School. Some guys were up there and wrestling, and they yelled down to me, and I said, I'd rather wrestle than play basketball, so I just threw the basketball away and went upstairs to wrestling practice, and been wrestling ever since.
What grade was that?
8th grade.
8th grade. And when did you find out you were pretty good at wrestling?
Well, I was in DeKalb County, and in DeKalb schools, 8th grade was included in the high schools, so we got to wrestle with the high schoolers, so I could wrestle with and maybe beat some of the older guys, so I said, well, I always liked wrestling, wrestling in the yard and that kind of stuff, so I could hang with some of the older guys that were experienced, and at that time Lithonia had a good wrestling team. That was before they had classifications, and I said, well, I'll just stick with it. So, and I never quit anything, so I said, I'll just stick with it, and I stayed in there, and we won state when I was a senior at Lithonia. So,
who are some of the people that you credit for your success in wrestling?
I guess older wrestlers when I was wrestling and I was younger. Of course, my head coach, Walter Queen, he was a shop teacher. He didn't know a lot about wrestling, but his philosophy was that a rabbit learns to run by running, and you learn to wrestle by wrestling. So we wrestled a lot at practice. And I went to Georgia and was on the judo team, and then I got out and graduated, and I was lucky enough to get a job at Chamblee, and Robert Cooley was the head coach at Chamblee, and we kind of hit it off, and I was lucky to be at a school that was serious about wrestling at Chamblee, and I think my second or third year we were there, we won state, Quad A state, and just watching other coaches. I remember when I was wrestling in high school, Coach Winterstein was at Chamblee, so seeing old coaches and learning from them, learning good things and bad things. I remember John Sprague from Rockdale, who I learned a lot from, not to be like, but you pick up things, from different coaches. And
is there a funny or unusual or something memorable during your time at wrestling? I'll never forget when this happened.
Well, I was at Chamblee. I had a wrestler. His name was John Stewart, but everybody knew him as Horse Meat. And he was wrestling JV for me, and something happened to the varsity wrestler, and he got to break into the lineup. And we were hosting the area tournament, and he won the area tournament. He was a short, little, dumpy guy, and he still is. And won the area tournament. People would just look at him and kind of, and we went to the state tournament. He was in the semifinals wrestling a kid from Southwest DeKalb and was behind, so he let him go. And we were doing a lot of freestyle stuff at that time, and he hit that kid with a lateral drop, put him on his back, won the match, and went into the finals. Of course, he didn't win the finals, but to me, that was probably one of the most memorable things that happened as a coach.
What are some of the things, David, that you're proud of, most proud of during your time in wrestling? You mentioned a couple of state championships as a wrestler and as a coach.
Yeah, another kid at Chamblee, that his name was Nicky Christie. He his junior year, he lost in the quarterfinals. We were at the Cobb Civic Center, and he just went crazy in the locker room. And the policeman came out and said, "Coach, you better go calm this kid down." And he was mad. "I'll never wrestle again. I'll never wrestle again." And I calmed him down, and he says, "I'll never lose again." And the next year, as a senior, that's the year we won state at Chamblee in '79. He was wrestling a kid from Towers, and the kid had him in a kind of like a double arm bar from behind, and he was real flexible anyway. He just kind of kicked over and was on top of that kid, turned the kid over and pinned him, and you know, that kind of sealed the championship for us. And I thought, well, he lived up to his promise. He wouldn't lose again, and and he won all the way through that year. That was a very memorable thing.
What do you think wrestling teaches, other than how to wrestle? Life lessons.
Well, you talk to any kids and they'll say it teaches self-discipline. You know, you got to keep your weight down, and it's always during the holidays, you know, and you can't eat what you want to eat. And a lot of self-sacrifice too. And I guess anything that's worth, and this is an old cliche, worth having is worth working hard for. And wrestling definitely applies there. You know, you have to work hard. And some people are naturals, and some of us have to work hard. But to be a state champion or a state placer, you have to work hard, make sacrifices, and have self-discipline. So.
Well, now you're elected to the Hall of Fame about what you have given to the sport of wrestling. What has wrestling given to you, David Harris?
I guess meeting a lot of good people, a lot of kids. They're not kids anymore. What they grow up to be. I got a state representative, James Mills, other, I guess, famous, semi-famous people that see kids on the street. Well, again, they're not kids anymore, and they say, you know, "I remember, Coach, when, you know, you worked with us." And I'll get, you know, since I've been inducted, I'm, you know, trying to contact people on Facebook and through email, and I'll get notes saying, you know, "You might not remember me, but, you know, I remember wrestling for you." And that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah. How do you feel about your induction to the Hall of Fame?
Well, I was surprised, definitely surprised and excited. I figured I was all washed up, you know, because I retired about 4 years ago. But the only induction I'd been to was when Doug Thurman was inducted. And I said, well, that's pretty cool, you know, Doug deserves it. But I was definitely honored, and I just assumed that, well, they looked at me and said, well, he's hung around long enough, he needs to be in the Hall of Fame. But I'm definitely honored to be in the Hall of Fame. And, you know, the other people that have been inducted that I know, good friends of mine, good coaching friends, that are in there, I'm honored to be in there with them. Mike Godlewski, you know, I've known him forever. So it's definitely an honor. So.
Any closing thoughts?
Oh, I just, wrestling's been good to me. And I appreciate that, you know, everything that it's given to me, and I've tried to give back, you know, as much as possible. So.
All right, David Harris, Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Thank you. have to worry about my speech being very long. Jeff Wheeler said, "You got 5 minutes," and I'm going to make it under 5 minutes. And Paul White told me, "Don't tell any stories, just thank you and sit down." So I'm going to try to stay with that. Anyway, speaking of Paul White, first I'd like to thank Paul White because I found out that he nominated me for this honor. Paul and I go way back. We started out as, I guess you could say, arch rivals. He was at Gainesville High School, and I was at Johnson. If you know anything about North Georgia, they were, arch enemies for a while. But now I'm proud to call Paul a really good friend. I'd also like to thank the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Board for awarding me this honor, especially Jeff Wheeler for his persistence in staying after me, and I'm sure the rest of these guys trying to make sure we get everything done that we're supposed to get done. And he's a good president, so he does a good job at it. Also like to thank Bud Hannibal, and Bud had an enormous job of addressing all the invitations and sending them out, and I know him and his family had to work hard on that, and I appreciate that, Bud. I'm also thankful for my mother, who cooked the special meals for me when I was in high school trying to lose weight. She did Weight Watchers, and so would I. Today you try to tell a wrestler, you got to stay on that diet all through the weekend. No, they'll eat 4 pizzas, after weigh-in. But anyway, I was eating healthy, and I learned how to eat salads with just lettuce and lemon on it. So, I also like to thank my family at home who put up with my absences from October to February. And all wrestling coaches know that, that's right during the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, and you got to practice and stay on weight. So it's a tough thing to be involved in. As far as my family is concerned, it's very special to me that I got to coach my son Gabriel in wrestling, so I appreciate the chance to do that. Another big thank you goes out to my uncle Philip Fishman, who lives in Kentucky, for his help and encouragement to finish school at Georgia, or I probably wouldn't be here today receiving this award. To my former wrestlers, friends, family, I really appreciate you coming out, taking time this weekend to come to this awards banquet. I'd like to thank Robert Cooley, who's head coach at Chamblee High School, one of those great wrestling programs I was lucky enough to be a part of, for his guidance as mentor at my first coaching job when I was his assistant. And we had a lot of matches with Coach Godlewski. It was a battle royal when Chamblee and Columbia wrestled. We had 6 or 8 DeKalb County policemen there, and it was a battle. We filled up the gym, and that was rare in those days. I'd like to thank Johnson High School for hiring me to my first head coaching job, and the Hall County Board of Education for respecting the judgment of those at Johnson who thought I might be a good wrestling coach. I thank you to the coaches that allowed me to be their assistant so I could just coach wrestling. These coaches include Mitch McGee, Doug Thurman, Drew Rogers, Kerry Whitlow, and Jay Hargis. And I'd like to again thank Doug Thurman and Kerry Whitlow for speaking a few stories and anecdotes last night at the social. I think we all enjoy that, and thanks again, Doug and Kerry. I'm also thankful for the many coaches that I coached against. One of them, Coach Godlewski. Learning something from each one. And what I learned from the opposing coaches helped me to be a better coach in the process. Notable coaches like Jack King from Jefferson, Ed Winterstein, and he's still around here, And that's a good thing, Coach. John Sprague from Rockdale, if any of you remember John Sprague, ooh, that was a rough fellow. Some of you know him. Paul White, again, a good friend. Lee Medwick, another wild man like John Sprague. Errol Bisso, Cliff Ramos, Steve Arenas, and Jay Gassman, just to name a few. Finally, I would like to thank the many parents that entrusted their sons and a daughter or two for me to coach. Hopefully I guided these young people in the right direction, not just on the wrestling mat, but in becoming young adults with character and integrity. And everybody mentioned that wrestling is not just about wrestling on the mat. It carries you into life. So again, I try to make it short, and I appreciate it, and thanks to the board for nominating me, and thanks again. See y'all.
Tell me about some of your earliest memories of wrestling. How did you get your start in the sport?
Well, I remember being in 4th grade, and we had a student teacher from Springfield College come in PE class, and he, I guess, had been a wrestler, so he did a little wrestling unit. And I found success in it. I was a pretty strong kid. My dad always had me working, so, I felt it was something that I could really do. Didn't really get on a team until I was in 8th grade. I should have went out in 7th grade, but to be honest with you, I was scared, so I went out when I was in 8th grade and again, had pretty good success. So it carried me through high school and then college.
So did you realize about the 8th grade that, I can do this, I'm pretty good at this?
Yeah, and we used to have it in the PE classes
yeah.
too, so I would be able to beat the, other kids in there and that were on the team. So by 8th grade, I decided to make that commitment.
And the varsity, where did you get your start in high school? What was the varsity high school?
Well, our high school started 10th grade, and when I went, I was really JV. I was one of those kids that was too good for JV and not quite good enough for varsity. I wrestled 2 varsity matches my sophomore year. Both of them I spent on my back. One of them, I think I lost like 21-2, and the other one 12-1. Didn't get pinned, but ended up bridging for about 5 minutes and 58 seconds probably.
So
But
that's a sophomore year. So did you kind of turn it around your junior year?
in my junior year, we were a very strong high school team, and my sophomore year was our worst finish ever. We were 500. So after that year, the sophomores got together and said, listen, if we're going to get back where we need to be, this is where we all need to come in. So we decided where we were going to go for weights, and came back and then had pretty good success my junior and senior year.
Okay. Well, who are some of the people that you're grateful to for your success in the sport?
Definitely, my high school coach, George Beaudry, and Rob Sosmo were great role models and great coaches. My middle school or junior high school coach, John Bulmer, pushed me, and Jack Wilson. Coach Parker at Springfield College, did a great job. All those coaches along the way, really made it an impact.
What are some of the things that you really remember that stick out in your mind, or that you're most proud of during your time in wrestling? I'll never forget this.
Winning the state championship was pretty cool.
Hmm.
One of the things, my dad and I always had a great relationship, still do. And the only strife we ever really had was going into my senior year during the summer, because he was worried about the weight loss. I would cut about 30 to get to 138. And I remember him getting on me about something, and I just finally said, you know, you don't really know what you're talking about this sport. And I said, I'm going to go down there and I'm going to win this tournament. I'm going to win this. I'm going to win the state. And he said, okay, make sure you do it. And so that was kind of a...
Did you do other sports?
Yes, I played soccer. And I guess I really started wrestling kind of to stay in shape for soccer. And then by my junior year, I saw the writing on the walls, but much better wrestler than I was a soccer player.
What do you think wrestling teaches, Steve, other than how to wrestle? In other words, life lessons. What do you think?
It is life. You know, I think it just teaches you to handle adversity. It's awesome for kids, the one-on-one that they get, the competition. There's no place to hide, you know, and it's stepping up and doing what you have to do, you know, and that's life. When you get knocked down in life, you got to pull yourself up off the mat and keep going.
So what do you think wrestling has given back to you? Now, this is talking about what you've given to wrestling. What do you think wrestling has given back to you?
I owe everything to wrestling. Wrestling got me into college, got me my first job, and that's why I'm down in Georgia. Steve Cunningham from Pace Academy called up Springfield College. They were looking for a wrestling coach and a PE teacher, and that was me. That got me down here. After Pace, I went to Wheeler High School. I taught at an elementary school. That's where I met my wife. You know, so that was a big thing. Also, you know, 5 years ago I had throat cancer, and wrestling played a big part in that because you know, when I got that diagnosis, it was like, okay, you know, let's go. I'm ready for this. And you know, I wore a wrestling shirt to all my treatments because it, you know, I felt the strength of the sport and the community.
What do you think about being inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Oh, what a humbling experience. I was going down the line at the state tournament shaking everybody's hands, and these were like, you know, my role models and my idols and good friends, and they're in there, and to be included in there, it's awesome. Awesome.
Any closing thoughts, Steve?
Just, you know, I think that you know, I thank God every day that wrestling found me and I found wrestling. I think it's awesome, and it's a super great community of coaches and wrestlers, and once you're a wrestler, you know, it's a bond because it's
a family.
It is, and I think that everybody, no matter where you came from, you know, any part of the country, if you find another wrestler, you know, you did the same thing. You were in there and you were sweating and you were busting it, and maybe, you know, everybody has those stories to share, and it's a great community.
Steve Latazori, Hall of Fame. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir.
I'm both honored and humbled to be here tonight. I'd like to thank my longtime friend Jeff Wheeler and the rest of the committee for nominating me and inducting me into this great fraternity. I had throat cancer a couple of years ago, so my voice is raspy. I don't want you to think I'm trying to imitate Pete Fritz Sr. over there. It's great being inducted with this group because I feel I have some great ties with the other inductees. Pete and I wrestled against each other many times. Rob Larimore and I took a couple teams out to cadet nationals. Bill Hess was my booster club president when I got to Wheeler, helped me get that job. And Mike Godlewski and I had many mat side battles over the years. The thing about Mike is he's always kept that cool, even-keeled demeanor, no matter how wrong he was. He always kept that. I've gotten more out of the sport of wrestling than I could ever give back. Wrestling got me into college, kept me in college, got me to move down here, got me to meet my beautiful wife, Robin, who's been my rock. She has supported and tolerated me for over 25 years. And believe it or not, I can be intense at some time. Wrestling has given me the opportunity to coach and work with some awesome young people that were willing to allow me to coach them and accept my coaching. But I wouldn't be here tonight if I wasn't able to surround myself with great people. I have a top-notch staff. Kurt Cross and I have been coaching together since the early Wheeler years. Kurt is a great coach and a man of character. Rich Brothers, tough exterior, but he has a heart of gold. He loves our kids. Jerry Richardson is a genius when it comes to functional wrestling strength and helps our kids out tremendously. It's a good thing that I'm the only one that can drive the bus, otherwise I'd probably be out of a job with these guys. My first exposure to wrestling was when I was in the 4th grade. We had a student teacher from Springfield College come down and do a wrestling unit in my PE class. And by the way, that's when I decided that I wanted to be a PE teacher and a wrestling coach. I took to it like a duck to water. I was small, but I had a great strength to weight ratio. And this could be attributed to my dad. When I was little, my dad would buy Kingsford charcoal in the 20-pound bag. And he always treated me like a man. So he'd take the bag out of the trunk and he'd say, bring it around the back of the house. Well, mind you, I was probably about 40 pounds at that time. Some people might think that's child abuse in this day and age, but what that taught me was it taught me how to bear hug, and it taught me how to gut wrench sometimes, but it taught me never to give up. So when I got to high school, I was coached by Hall of Famer George Beaudry, and Coach Beaudry said, never get pinned. You get pinned, you accept total defeat. Never accept total defeat. I was pretty coachable, so I never got pinned. Coach Beaudry also ruled with an iron fist. And one of his things was he never yelled at us or said anything when we were out there on the mat. His philosophy was, I've taught you everything you need to know in practice. If I'm yelling and screaming, it looks like you don't know what you're doing. So I thought, hey, this is great. I want to coach that way. So when I first started coaching, I tried it. And soon I realized that there's a lot of kids that really don't know what they're doing out there. After high school, I went to Springfield College, and it was coached by another Hall of Famer, Doug Parker. And Doug Parker just turned 90 years old, and I went back to Springfield to see him. I hadn't been back in over 30 years. And he walked in the room, and he saw me. He said, lad, and tapped the guy next to him and went, 42-pounder. 90 years old remembers that. So after 4 years at Springfield, Steve Cunningham from Pace Academy called Springfield, said they were looking for a wrestling coach, PE teacher. So I came down here. Pace Academy was great. I had some very talented, hardworking kids, but I wanted to be in a big public school. That's the way I kind of was brought up, and I wanted to be able to help those kids get to college and get what I got out of wrestling. So when the Wheeler job opened up, it was like a dream come true. Now the Wheeler High School is a program that's steeped in Hall of Fame coaching tradition. It was started by Frank Keller, and then Gordon Pritz pushed them and won a state championship, and then Randy Bortles was there. So pretty tough competition, a little overwhelming for me. But the parents accepted me, and like Bill said, I thought enough of them to propose to my wife in front of them. Antoine Sims that wrestled for me afterwards, he said, well, we just said, she said no, and I said, oh, well, you know, how could she say no to me? And then I started thinking about it. That could have kind of wrecked that story. I will always have fond memories of Wheeler, like the time that Steve Day set the state finals lineup, so my three guys went back to back to back. Tim Trong, Kevin Beddoes, and Peter Kazmazak, and we won all three. That was pretty amazing. Or the last match I coached as the Wheeler coach, which was Chris Hickman, winning his second state championship. When I got the Kell job, Brian Haig congratulated me, and he said, everybody should have an opportunity to start their own program once. And he was right about that. It's a huge undertaking when you start a program, but it's yours. Kell's been awesome. I've had great kids to coach, supportive parents, and I got to coach my son. My daughter was manager for me, so it was really kind of special. One of the things that professionally gives me the most satisfaction is when kids that I've coached get back to the program. Adam Williams and Blaine Hess, both class of '91, when we were at Wheeler, Adam came and was a community coach for me, and he brought levity to the team, but also a spirit of competition. Blaine took the junior program, and he had great instruction, but he taught those kids to love the sport of wrestling. And Blaine has gone on. He's coached a ton of young people, and one of the reasons Cobb County is successful is because of people like Blaine has. And now I have Paul Amon, who's the coach of my youth program, and it's just, that's what really turns me on more than winning the state championship. It's just seeing these kids have the love and wanting to continue. I never became a wrestling coach for the fame or the fortune. I just wanted to give back to the sport that's, you know, done so much for me. Thank you.
If you look in your program on page 9, you can read all about the National Medal of Courage winner, Randy Bortles. Now, Randy has been a rock to the sport of wrestling here in the state of Georgia, just about every level and just about every way imaginable. And we'd like to bring him up right now. He's a member of our Hall of Fame here, the Georgia chapter of the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, and as you can read all about him, and I'm not going to read it for you because you can read it for yourself. Randy will make a few remarks here, but he will receive the National Medal of Courage Award at the National Wrestling Hall of Fame Honors Weekend in Stillwater, Oklahoma, this coming June 3rd and 4th. All right. Come on up, brother.
All right.
Randy Bortles.
Thanks. There's a reason that I'm coming on last, because I can stand up for about 2 minutes, and when I fall down, this is over. So, you know. I'd like to congratulate the class of 2016. What an awesome class. Let's give it up for them one more time. I'm really proud of a couple more Wheeler Wildcats going in. Whoop, whoop, good way to go. Good job, Wildcats. So we got a good tradition going on there. Let's keep it going. The Medal of Courage, it's an award that they give to people that are former wrestlers that overcome insurmountable odds, is what they say, physically and mentally. My situation was in May of 2002, I was in a motorcycle accident. I tell the kids I was attacked by a shark in Lake Lanier. It gives me a little bit more street cred, but it was really a motorcycle accident. And I found myself in the Shepherd Center, Spinal Center, which is a tremendous facility. And the Georgia wrestling community really rallied around me. So I wanted to thank them. I didn't really get a good chance to do that the last time, I don't think, but they rallied around me. They they came down to Shepherd, and my injury level was so high that I was a quadriplegic. I couldn't move anything. And they came down, and you really don't know much about people until they show up and they have to feed you. You know, and if you've ever been fed by a wrestler, it's 2 for them and 1 for you. I was the only guy at Shepherd that lost weight while I was there. So, one other situation, I mean, wrestlers will do anything for you. It's a tremendous group. I'm there one day with one of my visitors, another Hall of Famer, Marty Hutzel, who you all know and love. And Marty recognized that the nurses at Shepherd were cute. He just mentioned. So, being Marty, he asked them, he said, well, how do you shower, Randy? And this young, very attractive lady said, without stopping, said, well, Randy gets the special shower treatment. And he said, oh yeah, what's that? He said, well, we all take our clothes off and shower with Randy. Marty was there every shower day for the next 2 weeks. I was in Shepherd for about 6 months. You have to learn to get back up on your feet if you can. Bud Hannibal brought his dad by one day. Probably about 4 months in. I didn't realize it at the time, but I hadn't seen Walt the whole time I was there. And Walt came in and he was saying, Randy, listen, you're going to battle through this. You're going to get out. And I found out later that Walt, was it his brother? What? His brother Fred was a quadriplegic also from a wrestling accident. Back in the 70s when they really didn't know how to take care of people. They were converting vans and driving them around and tying them down and all sorts of crazy shit. But he lived for 17 years. And Walt came in and he said, listen, your wrestling DNA is going to get you through this. He said, but he said, beyond that, he said, you're going to walk out of here or they'll carry you out or whatever. You'll get out of here. And when you do, he said, you have to have a purpose beyond this. He said, that's what you need to carry you through. And I really didn't understand what he was talking about. He goes, Randy, you have to give back. I'm like, okay. So it was good because it drove me back into the wrestling family, Bud and his family. Excuse me. And we started giving back. And they included me in the wrestling Hall of Fame stuff. I was involved with the Atlanta Takedown Association. And probably the most proud thing that I think we've all done, Jeff Wheeler and Bud and Gary and all those guys, we have, in the last 6 years, we've started 8 college wrestling programs in the state of Georgia. 5 men's programs and 3 women programs. So our kids have an opportunity to wrestle here in the state of Georgia because of Bud and Jeff and Gary Schaefer and all the guys that are here. So that's the thing I'm most proud of. I want you to know when I go out to Stillwater in June, I will be a good representative of the award. And I appreciate it. And I want to thank the wrestling community of Georgia. Thank you.
Don't leave just yet. Don't leave just yet, Randy. Our president, Jeff Wheeler.
Randy, while most of us would love to be in Stillwater in 5 weeks, the vast majority of us will not physically, but certainly emotionally will be there with you. We appreciate everything that you do and continue to do for our great sport. We have a little token of our appreciation, maybe let you buy a couple of t-shirts while you're out in Stillwater from your wrestling friends, the Atlanta Takedown Association, ATA board members, and the members of the Georgia chapter of the Hall of Fame. Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Jeff.